to overcome these challenges, because every one of my clients loves their partner. The love is there, although it maybe sometimes fades because of all of these challenges, but they deeply do want to make it work, but they're just missing the skills. And that's something you can learn. And it's something we don't learn. So we also need to give ourselves some compassion and some time to learn and to practice these things.
Hello, and welcome to another amazing episode of TMC, where we are here to help you take your relationships
from surviving to thriving.
If this is your first time joining us, go ahead and subscribe. Click the like button and turn on your notifications so you'll be notified each time we upload a video. Today on TMC, we have Alexandra Schelling with Toolbox for Love.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So I'm Alexandra, Alex for short, and I'm a life and relationship coach now for Toolbox for Love. So Toolbox for Love is, something I've created 2 years ago. Definitely not the route that I thought I would take. I was in corporate before, but I decided to go a very different route and create Toolbox for Love. As I've gone through relationship challenges with my now husband. We've been together for almost 14 years now. And I always thought, why don't we learn these things? And I wish I had learned things sooner. So to navigate these challenges. So that's where I am today, but a bit more about maybe me. Maybe you've seen my second name. It's Yukiko, because I was born in Japan. And so I lived there for about 4 years before traveling the world and settling then in Switzerland. So people usually ask, like, what is your second name, and why are you called Yukiko? So that's why. And I'm now in Singapore. So I just moved here last year. So that's a little bit more about who I am.
Oh, wow, Alexandra, you've been around the world. That's pretty cool. That's
Literally.
Pretty cool. Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about how you use Toolbox for Love to help others.
Sure. So, I believe that we get to have different types of tools in our toolbox, and it's something that I teach my clients and I teach in my courses. And so I teach you different types of tools because every situation is unique and every tool might be useful depending on the situation. One tool might be very useful for one person and one tool will be useful for someone else. So one tool could be, communication skills. The other one would be how to understand how we each feel loved and what our needs are. Another tool could be how to increase the spark, how to reconnect. Another one would be how to manage our emotions or anxiety or doubts in a relationship. And so those are different tools that I see fit very well in a relationship toolbox, let's say, that I feel like we all get to learn because we don't learn these things, and decide, what do I need in this situation? Now I feel empowered. If I have a challenge, I can reach out to my toolbox and find the tool that I need. Okay, now we're having a difficult conversation. How do I start it? Okay, I go to my communication toolbox or tool, let's say, in my toolbox, and I know how to start a conversation. I know how to, navigate it, even when it's hard. And so those are the tools that typically I find really useful to have in a toolbox.
Awesome. So you mentioned a few tools as you were talking about the toolbox. So let's jump into one of those tools. You teach a little bit about communication. So let's talk a little bit about the 4 communication reminders you feel that we all need to have in our relationship.
This is something that you can do as an individual if you want to bring up a conversation, initiate a conversation. Sometimes we feel like, oh, my partner also has to be ready or willing to do this. But with this framework, you're going to see, or with these 4 steps, you're going to see, okay, this is how I can approach the conversation. This is what I can do on my side to really create that safe space to talk. I always say, the first communication part is to notice how you're doing even before the conversation. Is how am I doing as I'm stepping into it? And it's like, I like to see it as like the behind the scenes of a conversation. It's like, what's going on for me? Where are my thoughts right now? Am I thinking about the worst of my partner? Am I giving them the benefit of the doubt? That makes a difference. Or am I very, very stressed because of work? Or am I taking a step back to ground myself before a difficult conversation? That matters. Yeah. So that's the first part that I call listening, but not listening to your partner. It's listening to yourself, listening to what's happening inside of myself. So I teach, yeah, exactly. So I teach different frameworks to actually be able to do that. But that's the first step, to say, how do I listen to what's going on for me? Because how I show up makes a huge difference and creates ripple effects. So
yeah,
that's kind of the part of, to say, okay, I can't control my partner, but how I show up influences the other person, because we are all interconnected in a sense. So it does make a difference. So I guess that would be the first part, is what's going on for me in my world, so that I can show up in a way that opens up the conversation and creates that safe space, because it's so important. And we all have that fundamental need to feel safe. It's such an important need that if we don't create that safety at first, it leads to dead ends, it leads to fights, it leads to triggers. And so it's such a crucial step to just check in with yourself and go, what's going on for me? How am I feeling? How am I doing? Where are my thoughts going? What can I do to just ground myself and be present and put things in perspective if needed? So, because our brain is very good to go into the negatives and very good at assumptions and very good at jumping to conclusions. So we want to put things in perspective in that listening part. How we show up, I can go very, very, very deep into, especially my clients who want to understand their emotions, understand why they're feeling very anxious, even if they love their partner, why they have doubts, why the stories just keep on repeating themselves in their brain, and they're like, my mind is just going crazy and just going down this rabbit hole. But things are usually okay. Like I think I'm with a secure partner. I think I'm with someone I at least want to grow with. But these thoughts keep coming up. My emotions are overwhelming. I feel like I have no control over my emotions. You understand what's going on in your world, because when you understand yourself, and I know that has been a huge part of my personal growth and the growth of the relationship, is understanding myself. And until I did that, I would keep hitting the same walls, the same fights. And so it's understanding your own world through these different ways of like looking at the situations, your anxiety, your doubts, your emotions, your thoughts, being like, oh, this is why I'm thinking this, or this is how I can deal with this emotion. It's not controlling me anymore. So those are typically like the in-depth things that we can definitely look into.
That is awesome, Alexandra. And you said something that I was like, wow, that's so true. A lot of times we don't really check in with ourselves, and then we find ourselves repeating the same issues over and over. And sometimes even couples that are having these disagreements, like we keep having the same fight, we keep facing the same thing. But you said something that is so important for us to remember, is checking in with yourself, working on you, asking yourself how you're showing up, because that's what I hear you saying. You starting with you, and then moving into what the conflict actually is, or what the problem actually is, but starting with you first to make sure that your emotions are in check and your mind is in the right place.
Yeah. So, just the other month, more or less now, I tried to approach the conversation with my now husband in two different ways. And I saw a very different reaction from him in how I approached it. And then it was more to kind of see, okay, is this, does it really make a difference when I check in with myself? Like that's the question. And it did incredibly, like, and even now when we have conversations, the way I show up does make a difference. So how you can even check in with yourself and how you can even start to do that is, we tend to get upset at situations and react very quickly. We usually have a split second to respond to situations. Our brain is always, always, always scanning the environment a few times per minute. It's always doing that. And so we want to understand, that's something I teach my clients, is how the brain works. Because when we understand how the brain works, you can make sense of all of these things. But to give you something practical is to ask, okay, I'm upset. Let me just pause for a second, for a minute. Can I just pause right now? And kind of become the observer of the situation. That in itself can be a practice. I'm not saying it's easy, right? But it's that awareness of saying, what's going on in my world? What are my thoughts? What are my emotions? Why am I feeling this way? What kind of led to that? And I guess it's that second that we want to start to master, because it happens so quickly, because the brain, again, wants to keep us safe, wants to, protect us. And so I guess that second can save a lot of hardships.
Yeah, and I think why this is so important and why we need this toolbox is because sometimes emotions get in the way.
In the way.
It get in the way and it totally take over. And it's like, if you don't have the toolbox and those tools in your mind at that particular time, you will respond and you can cause havoc on the relationship versus something.
Oh, yeah.
This just happened.
Yeah.
Alexandra, this just happened to us 3 days ago. 3 days ago, we went out to eat, and that was a miscommunication.
Yeah.
And what happened, and on her end, she actually did that. She analyzed the situation. It was a pause. We didn't really talk much after that. I finished my food or whatever. And even that aspect of it, I'm thinking about it. I stopped, finished eating. I mean, it wasn't crazy or anything, but I mean, we had that moment and we came back. Maybe, I want to say, was it an hour or 30 to 45 minutes? 45 minutes we came together, and it was all good. And I remember in the past, maybe 10 years ago, this same situation like this would happen, and we'd be upset for like 3-4 days. I mean, so this stuff is necessary, right?
And when you were saying that, Alex, that's what I thought about, Cedric. I was thinking about, because we had a conversation about the miscommunication later. And I was telling him, I said, I funneled it. That's the word I used. I funneled it through the tools that I have, the things that I learned. I funneled it through there to say, what is really happening? What really happened versus what I'm telling myself happened right now. And it was amazing to see that it's working. And I know that it works, but for myself to have that moment to say, okay, pause, put it into action, funnel it through the tools that you know. And when you funnel it through there and you get that beep, 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 okay, now this is you. This is not what's happening. This is you. And it was able to be corrected within a matter of an hour. And we talk about it and it's like, okay, this was a complete miscommunication.
And you corrected within your own mind.
Yeah.
Alexandra, I want you to talk to that individual. I mean, we already kind of expressed, but I mean, just really expressing what this toolbox means to you, and why do everyone need to get this toolbox into their own daily lives routines?
Yeah, and I love your example, because to answer your question, I usually tell clients that I also have disagreements with my partner. I also have arguments. I also get into conflict. And they're like, oh, really? And so I think we imagine that there's this picture perfect relationship happening on the other side, Instagram highlights and stuff.
Come on.
But I always say, it's a daily thing. It's a daily thing where we need to put effort. And it does get better. So we know how to better navigate the challenges. And as you said, miscommunication, I'm glad that you managed to get back into a healthy communication after a conversation after you had that miscommunication. And that's the goal with the toolbox. It's to say, I have the tools, I'm empowered to deal with these type of situations. As you said, Shante, it's I'm funneling down with the tools that I have, and we need to practice them. I totally agree that we need to actually put them in action, right? Because that's also something else that I hear is, I rationally know what I need to do. I know that I should take a step back. I know that I should talk this way to my partner and not this way. But actually putting that in action is so important. And so with your toolbox, you're kind of practicing these skills. And I say that conflict is an opportunity to learn how to do better, to grow. And I was just talking about this with 3 clients just yesterday. All of them, we had this topic around our relationship is one of the best places to grow, because it also triggers you so much. But it is the best places to also be fulfilled and be secure and learn. And I was telling my client, it's very easy to be single and to be, you don't have to care for anyone. And I'm saying easy to be single in a sense of, you don't have to think, oh, how am I, showing up for this person in the relationship? And she went, that is so true. That's why I want to be single, because it's so hard, to communicate. And it's true. And I don't blame her, and I don't blame any of anyone who thinks this way, because I thought that way. When we're 2, it's a very different dynamic. We have to learn, how to interact with each other, how to overcome these challenges. And that toolbox experience is to say, I now have the tools to work through these challenges and to overcome them, so that I can actually feel like I'm growing together with my partner. Because a big thing is that I hear is, I love, and I've been there too, is I love my partner, want things to work out, but these challenges, and we keep getting into the same fights. Like, I don't see myself having these in 10 years. Like, I don't want to be with someone where we keep hitting these walls all the time, but I still love my partner. And and I wanted to work out. And I was there multiple times in my own relationship and so confused and so frustrated and so resentful sometimes that now it's like, no, now I have the tools to actually work through these things so that we can create something that works for both of us.
No, this is perfect.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I really I'm glad you mentioned the last piece, because someone may get the toolbox and after 6 months, like, man, this thing is not working, because we're living in an instant gratification society. So people think it happens overnight, but I mean, we're just explaining how you have to put in the work. You have to put in the work. It doesn't happen overnight. It's challenging, but it's also fun in the end, because just like I experienced this week, I mean, we literally had a happy moment about it. Was like, wow, we overcame something that was once a stumbling block, but now is a stepping stone in our life. And now it's just so great. And it's already difficult for me to understand myself, not alone now.
Understand
Yes, I mean,
Absolutely.
so the toolbox is necessary. Thank you.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
You know, you're able to come together after these challenges. That creates enormous trust. And we usually skip that part. We're like, oh, conflict is bad. And we put that in the bad category. Like arguments are not something's wrong. And I keep hearing these things. And again, I thought all of these things aren't the same things that I thought too. But that creates trust, and that creates those hormones that actually create a lot of connection. And that's how you then keep the spark alive in sustainable ways. That's because you're actually creating such an important foundation of trust and connection, where you can say, we can handle this as a team. Okay, it doesn't mean we always agree, but we know how to come together, how to repair a fight. And that's what creates trust that then enables you to grow, further down the line. So I just wanted to add that to your piece, because it was so true.
Love that. This is definitely awesome. This is definitely awesome. And I'm definitely feeling the toolbox. And glad that I have the information in the toolbox to be able to use it when necessary. And you just said that it's important that we activate the tool. You also just mentioned something, and you used the word spark. So let's talk about what's in the toolbox that we can use for the married couples to help keep the spark alive.
That's a very good question. I could give, different activities you can do and different things you can do to keep the spark. But what I believe is that trust that you want to create is going to create the connection. And so I believe that's a more sustainable way to do it. And so things like, the communication part, how do we deal with these miscommunication moments? How do we understand each other? We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel like we matter. And so a big component is to make each other feel like you matter. That is huge to be able to keep the spark alive. And you do that by understanding your needs, understanding your different ways of feeling loved, understanding, even in a conversation, if Cedric, you're listening to Shante, maybe she's having a bad day, or she's, ranting about something that maybe you did, right, that you didn't enjoy. If you are there, if you can be present, if you can show her that you're listening, if you can validate her, if you can have that empathy, and just put your own just self 2 seconds for this on the side, just to say, I want to be there for her, you're going to ignite that spark, because she's going to feel heard, she's going to be seen, she's going to be understood. And that's how I believe I believe you create more of a sustainable spark, if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And I love it because, of course, when we talk about keeping the spark alive, most of the time we go to the keep dating, keep going out, keep holding each other's hands. But you just said something that is so profound.
It is. It's not profound. That's sexy. That's sexy.
Well, it's sexy. If you create a safe space and you continue to be intentional about working the tools so that you can have this atmosphere, this relationship where trust is there, where they can be authentic, where they can be transparent. That's what creates the spark that will last, right? That's amazing. I love that. I love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. So I want to ask you something. You have a post on Instagram that says love is not enough to keep a relationship. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. And kind of to the point of having different tools, those are, let's say, I've seen throughout the years that I could love my partner all I wanted. He could love me all he wanted. But when, you go through these different stages in a relationship, most relationships start out in a honeymoon phase where things are going pretty well. The love is there. The love hormones are super high. You feel all of these amazing things. You don't necessarily see or be, you're not necessarily bothered by your differences. So you're feeling in love. But then you kind of go through this other stage called the power struggle phase. And that's where you experience conflict and you experience differences. You notice what bothers you. All of that starts to happen. And so the love hormones tend to drop and that spark starts to fade. So the question is, what do you do there? And, there's a belief that you have to love your partner, and with love, it will work out. But what do you do when you have miscommunication, just like you guys just had, right? You can love each other, but how do you communicate? How do you bring topics up? How do you understand each other's needs? How do you check in with yourself? Even that in itself doesn't just require love, it requires skills. So that's the tools of the toolbox part that I mentioned is, what are the skills that you have to overcome these challenges? Because every one of my clients loves their partner. The love is there, although it maybe sometimes fades because of all of these challenges, but they deeply do want to make it work, but they're just missing the skills. And that's something you can learn. And it's something we don't learn. So we also need to give ourselves some compassion and some time to learn and to practice these things. So that's the part that I say, love can be there. And I see multiple people love their partner, but it just still doesn't work out. And so the power struggle phase is where many couples break up or drift apart, even if they love each other. So you want to understand, okay, what do I need? What's going on? What do I need to learn? Where are we hitting the wall? Is there maybe something there? If we're not able to bring up topics, how do I bring up topics that are important for me to discuss? If I'm not able to check in with myself and say things in a way that are constructive, maybe I need to learn how to manage my emotions. That's a skill. I can love my partner, but still feel overwhelmed by my emotions and not know how to handle them. That's a skill to learn. So there are many things there that are on top of love. So that's why I say, something I say is, love is important, but love without the relationship skills is why so many relationships fall apart. And even even so many great ones. And it always breaks my heart to see couples who want to make it work. But again, we don't learn these things in school or naturally at home. So we're kind of left with an empty toolbox to start with. So
you were saying, and I just thought about the phrase, when you can love someone and not like them. Like, I love you, but I don't like you. So the toolbox would definitely make us like our. Yes.
True.
So let's go here, Alex. As a client, what could I expect from working with you if I come to you and say, I love my partner, and we find ourselves at a place where it seems like we're stuck. We keep hitting the same wall over and over and over. We keep having the same arguments. What could I expect you to ask me? What would be the first thing I would do as a client?
Yeah, great question. So I would first want to understand your patterns, because sometimes we come into where we seek support and we think my partner is the problem or I am the problem and I need to fix myself or I need to fix my partner. And what I always say, it's your patterns that we need to look into. It's not you. You come with patterns and you come with past experiences. You come with your own, let's say, baggage. So let's have a look at your patterns. And when we look at your patterns, and when I do this with clients, we start to see, where's the missing, link, what is typically causing the challenge and the feeling of it's not working or we're getting stuck. And that tells me so much about the person and also the dynamics of the relationship. And it's to say, okay, this is the tool for you to start with. And I kind of have this roadmap with clients. And again, I have this toolbox, but every client is different. So it's like, we're going to start with this tool for you and this tool for you. And one tool that typically does, well, there are actually multiple, but one that is so important to understand are, what are your needs in the relationship? We sometimes aren't aware of our needs and why we even respond in certain ways. It's because we're trying to meet a need. And, we get upset. Oh, we might try to get attention from the other person because we want to feel like we matter. We want to feel seen. We want to feel heard. Okay, how can we have your needs met in new ways, in sustainable ways? What are other needs that you need that are not being expressed? Even sometimes, we have all of these expectations about what a relationship is. So that's also a huge part of saying, what are these expectations? And
wow.
then that's where we also see a lot of the conflict situations, because we create these rules of, this has to happen for me to feel happy. This has to happen for me to feel safe. This has to happen for me to feel this. And so you see how all of these different lenses that we look at your patterns from, and it's a huge aha moment in every session. So every session you leave with actionable steps. Every session you leave with a tool. So it's like you're building your toolbox as you go through the different weeks.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I believe that is so true, because a lot of times we don't think about what's from our past. You said our patterns. What part of our patterns is causing or playing a big role in what we see now, and understanding those patterns. So I definitely believe that would be an aha to sit and see, like, this is a pattern. This is something that it comes from childhood, something I learned, something I brought with me. This is something that I've been carrying for a while, and that's why it keeps showing up, or understanding it. I think, wow, that's good.
I love that angle.
I do too.
Patterns plus what can I do about it? That's a huge part of it. And a huge part that I was just discussing also with a client yesterday. She said, I have my therapist. I know that I'm going to talk to her about my feelings and unpack this. And I love that. But with you, what I want as a coach is for you to hold me accountable to actually put whatever you're going to teach me in practice. So that accountability piece is so huge. And that's, I guess, why I always advise, anyone to look for someone you resonate with, someone who has maybe gone even through the challenges you've gone through, has success in that, whether it's a therapist, a coach, a course that you take, whatever it is, a book that you read. It could be in any form, but you want to know that the style of growth and learning and the learning process is what you need in that moment. Some people need a very different thing at first. So my style is much more in the action step, to say, okay, we're going to look at this, but what can you do today? What can you do for next week? And start to build those habits. And every person, I believe, needs different things at different times. So I just wanted to point that out, because patterns, it's great to analyze them, but it's like, what can I do about them? Like, how can I feel empowered the next time this pattern comes up? What can I do the next time this trigger comes up? So that's a huge part of growth too.
Wow, this is awesome. This is good. This is awesome. So Alexandria, let's tell the TMC listeners, if someone wanted to connect with you, where would they go? What would they do? How would they connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm mainly present on Instagram. That's the account that I started when I started Toolbox for Love. So you can find me at Toolbox for Love there. And if you want a very practical first step, I have a free communication guide, since we were talking so much about communication. So it gives you actually 6 questions to keep the spark alive, since we were, talking about the spark. And again, it's going into that creation of trust and connection to be able to create that spark. So that gives you a, first step. But I have a lot of different posts about different topics that you can have a look into. So that would be the main platform. And hopefully soon I'll expand into other platforms. So yeah.
Alexandria, this has definitely been a great conversation. We have enjoyed you, and thank you so much for sharing with us and the TMC listeners. You've given us so many tools to use on tonight, and to be able to activate in our relationships, to take our relationships from surviving to thriving.
Yes. On behalf of the TMC community, we want to thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us all.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to connect with you today.
So we hope you enjoyed this video today. And if you did, go ahead and subscribe. Click the like button and turn on your notifications so you will be notified each time we upload a video. And if you're listening on iTunes, rate the podcast and leave a review. That helps us get the word out. And we want to invite you to head on over to our leadership podcast, Lead to Greatness, where my husband is interviewing entrepreneurs and great leaders from all around the world every week.
So we want to thank you for joining us today on TMC. Looking forward to hanging out with you again on next week as we continue to help you take your relationship from surviving to thriving. Bye. See you next week.